Why do some women lose interest in you before you even say a word? Not because of your looks, not because of your money, but because of something you didn't even realize you were showing. There's a silent language every man speaks. It's in your posture, your energy, your tone, your choices, everything you do or avoid doing. And women? They're wired to notice. Long before logic kicks in, they feel something. And if that feeling tells them you're weak, unsteady, unsure, easily shaken, they pull away. Not always visibly, but internally. Respect fades, attraction dies, connection dissolves. This isn't about pretending to be someone you're not. It's about uncovering the version of you that's been buried under years of social conditioning, rejection, fear, and confusion. Because the truth is, you were never meant to chase approval or seek permission. You were born to lead. But somewhere along the way, the world trained you to play small, to be agreeable, to stay quiet, to wait for others to decide your worth. And every time you hesitated, every time you second-guessed yourself, you unknowingly taught the world, and every woman watching, that you're not ready to stand in your full power. Most men don't see this. They wonder why they get ignored, ghosted, or put in the friend zone. They think it's bad luck, or that women are just too complicated. But deep down, it's not a mystery. Women feel what you believe about yourself. If you don't believe you're enough without constantly trying to prove it, they sense it instantly. Weakness isn't always loud. It's often quiet, subtle, invisible. It hides in the way you answer a question, in how you carry yourself, in how quickly you fold under pressure or discomfort. And that silent signal tells her everything. But here's the truth most men never hear. Weakness isn't permanent. It's not who you are. It's just a state you've practiced for too long. And strength is a choice, a decision, a habit, a shift that begins the moment you stop blaming your past and start building your presence. That moment when you decide you're no longer available for self-doubt, approval-seeking, or hiding. That's the moment she feels something different. She doesn't know what changed, but something in your energy speaks louder than words. You're no longer chasing, you're grounded, focused, clear. This video is not just about what women see. It's about what you project. It's about breaking the cycle of hidden weakness and stepping into a version of yourself that commands respect. Not with aggression, not with games, but with inner power. And if you stay with me until the end, you'll understand the 7 hidden ways women detect weakness, and more importantly, how to reverse them. You'll walk away with the tools to shift your energy, your mindset, and your identity. Because you're not here to be invisible. You're here to be unforgettable. It starts now, and it starts with the truth. You lose her the moment you start chasing her approval, the moment your words are designed to impress rather than express. When your actions scream, "Please like me," instead of "This is who I am." That invisible shift, when you begin performing instead of leading, is when the foundation of attraction starts to collapse. Women are not drawn to the man who constantly needs reassurance. They're drawn to the one who stands firm in who he is, with or without applause. Approval seeking is emotional debt. Every time you ask for it, you're giving away a piece of your power. And the more you give, the more she senses you don't have any left. You've been taught that being liked is the goal, that being agreeable, being kind, being available at all times is what makes you valuable. But women don't want a man who needs to be liked. They want a man who's already at peace with himself. Because if you need her validation to feel good about who you are, you're not loving her, you're using her. And deep down, she feels that. It may not be conscious, but her instincts pick up on it. It's not confidence that impresses her, it's certainty. Certainty in yourself, certainty in your path, certainty that you don't need her approval to feel like a man. This is the paradox most men never understand. The more you try to win her over, the more she pulls away. Not because you're not good enough, but because you're trying too hard to prove that you are. Strength isn't about proving anything, it's about knowing that you don't have to earn worthiness, knowing that your value isn't up for debate. When you lead with that energy, everything changes. She doesn't feel pressure. She feels peace. She doesn't feel obligation. She feels admiration. The man who seeks validation is always at war with himself. Every conversation becomes a battlefield. Every moment, a negotiation. Should I say this? Will she like that? Does she still find me interesting? That noise in your head, that constant scanning for approval, that's the real weakness. Because it keeps you out of your power. And if you're not in your power, she can't feel safe in your presence. It's not just about attraction, it's about trust. And a woman cannot trust a man who doesn't trust himself. Let her feel your wholeness. Let her feel that you are enough with or without her. not through arrogance, but through grounded stillness. Let your presence speak louder than your words. Let your calm silence carry more power than nervous compliments. When you no longer need her to make you feel worthy, she starts to see you as someone worth following. Someone who doesn't just attract, someone who leads. And that shift, subtle, unspoken, powerful, is what separates the invisible man from the unforgettable one. She watches how you make decisions, how long you hesitate, how often you defer, how quickly you doubt yourself when pressure hits. She doesn't need to hear your plans. She feels your uncertainty. And every moment you pause, second guess, or ask what she wants before knowing what you want, she senses it. You're afraid to lead. You're afraid to claim space. And the moment she sees that, a quiet shift happens inside her. You become less magnetic, less trustworthy, less stable, not because you're unkind, not because you're not enough, but because you're not rooted in direction. The deepest part of the masculine is decisiveness, the power to move, to choose, to act, not recklessly, but with clarity. That doesn't mean controlling others. It means taking ownership of your choices without hiding behind uncertainty. The man who always asks, "What do you think I should do?" may think he's being respectful, but often he's being passive. And passivity is invisible. It doesn't command attention. It doesn't make her feel safe. It doesn't inspire desire. She wants to feel your certainty, not about her, but about yourself. When you hesitate, you shrink. You invite doubt. You hand over the reins. And while you might think you're being accommodating, you're actually transferring the burden of leadership onto her. And deep down, she resents that. Not because she wants to control, but because she doesn't want to carry the weight of your indecision. A woman doesn't crave a man who's perfect. She craves a man who moves with purpose, who makes mistakes, owns them, and keeps moving forward. Indecision is not humility, it's fear. And fear, when left unaddressed, turns strength into weakness. You don't need all the answers. You don't need to predict every outcome. What you need is to trust your instincts and take the next step with confidence. That's how you build presence. That's how you build respect. Women follow energy, not logic. They follow the man whose presence calms chaos, the one who says, "This is what I believe, and I stand by it." Not with arrogance, but with clarity, not to dominate, but to guide. Because when you lead yourself, others naturally feel drawn to follow. If your life is stuck, if your relationships feel strained, if you're constantly questioning what to do next, it's time to stop outsourcing your power. Stop waiting for permission. Or start moving, start deciding. Start becoming the kind of man who builds momentum instead of hesitation. You are not made to live in pause. You are not made to constantly adjust yourself to fit what others expect. You were built to lead, not with noise, but with certainty. That's what she needs to feel. That's what makes her feel safe. And that's what wakes up the primal part of her that wants to lean into your energy instead of away from your doubt. Strength is not perfection, it's presence, and it's time to take yours back. When you try to impress her with your words, your energy betrays you. Talking too much, explaining too hard, trying to prove your worth through stories, jokes, or opinions. It all reveals one thing: you're not grounded. You're performing, and she can feel it. The more you talk, the more she listens to what you're really saying underneath. You're saying, "Please see me, please value me, please think I'm enough." But that's not strength. That's insecurity wrapped in noise. Real presence doesn't need to speak endlessly. Real power is quiet. It doesn't chase approval. It creates gravity. There's a part of every woman that wants to feel safe, not just physically, but emotionally. She wants to feel your stillness, your steadiness, your ability to hold space, not fill it with noise. When you talk to fill the silence, she knows you're trying to hide something. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's self-doubt. Maybe it's a desperate need to be liked. But the moment she senses you're not centered, she loses trust. Because if you can't be calm in conversation, how will you be calm when life gets hard? If you can't sit in silence with confidence, how will you handle pressure, conflict, or chaos? Every word you say should come from truth, not from fear. From clarity, not from need. You don't need to sell yourself. You don't need to explain every detail. You don't need to try to be interesting. When you stop trying to impress, you become magnetic. When you stop over-explaining, she starts leaning in. When you speak less, your energy starts to say more. Confidence lives in restraint, in control, in presence, in not needing to be seen to know your worth. Men who talk too much lose her attention, not because their stories aren't good, but because their energy isn't grounded. Their words are scattered. Their energy is chasing. They're trying to earn what they should already believe they deserve. And no matter how charming or funny they try to be, it falls flat. Because women don't remember every word you say. They remember how you made them feel. And if they feel your neediness instead of your certainty, they forget you. Fast. Say less. Mean more. Let your actions carry your message. Let your silence speak volumes. Let your energy do the talking. A man who knows who he is doesn't need to explain it. He lives it. He breathes it. He moves from it. And when she feels that, she doesn't just notice you, she respects you. Attraction is not created by talking louder. It's created by standing taller, breathing slower, and knowing your worth without shouting it. You are not here to perform. You are here to embody strength so deeply that even your silence feels like leadership. Stop impressing. Start expressing. Not through noise, but through presence.
That's the shift that changes everything.
A woman will test your emotional stability without even knowing she's doing it. She'll question your tone, disagree with something small, pull back slightly, or challenge your opinions, not to be cruel, but to feel your core, to see if you bend, break, or stand firm. And the man who crumbles at the first sign of resistance is the man she cannot trust. Not because he's unkind, not because he's weak in the physical sense, but because emotionally he has no anchor. He reacts. He over-explains. He defends himself with panic or pulls away with silent frustration. And in that moment, she sees it clearly. He's not grounded. He's fragile. Emotional reactivity is a sign of instability. It says you need things to go your way to feel strong. It says your mood is determined by her mood. Your self-worth is tied to her approval. Your sense of control disappears the moment someone challenges it. And when you operate like that, you hand her your power without realizing it. She may not say it out loud, but inside something changes. She stops respecting you. She stops feeling safe with you. Because if you can't handle pressure in a conversation, how will you protect her in the storms of life? Masculine strength isn't about being cold or emotionless. It's about holding your ground in the middle of emotional waves. When she pushes, you don't shove back. You stay steady. When she pulls away, you don't chase. You breathe and stay centered. When she tests your frame, you don't crumble. You smile, not with arrogance, but with confidence that says, I don't need to prove myself to stay who I am. That kind of presence is rare, and that kind of man is unforgettable. The moment you learn to stop reacting and start responding with calm power, everything shifts. You stop being a boy in a man's body and start becoming a man who cannot be shaken. You lead not through control, but through unshakable energy. You create safety, not by fixing her emotions, but by mastering your own. And she can feel that in your tone, in your eyes, in your breath. She knows when she can trust you with her emotions because she sees how you handle your own. Stop being afraid of tension. Stop trying to smooth everything over. Stop collapsing the moment things get uncomfortable. Tension reveals truth, and truth reveals character. Stand in it. Let her see that you don't break under pressure. Let her feel that your love doesn't depend on approval. Let her witness the version of you that doesn't need to be rescued from discomfort because you've learned to breathe through fire and stay still in the storm. That's what earns her respect. That's what keeps her drawn to you. Not loud words, not false confidence, but quiet power. And when that lives inside you, you don't chase attraction. It moves toward you on its own. There's nothing more unattractive than a man with no direction, a man who wakes up without a mission, a man who drifts, scrolls, waits, hesitates, and hopes life will somehow organize itself. Women don't consciously analyze it, but they feel it instantly. The lack of fire, the absence of hunger, the floating energy that comes from a man who's not going anywhere. No matter how kind, charming, or well-dressed you are, if your spirit is idle, your presence will be forgettable. Because the deepest part of the masculine is purpose. Without it, you're not grounded. You're lost. She watches how you move through life, how you treat your time, how seriously you pursue what matters. She's not looking for perfection. She's not looking for wealth. She's looking for energy. Forward motion, fire. A man who knows where he's going doesn't need to explain why he's attractive. She feels it in his conviction, in his discipline, in the way he shows up for himself first. He becomes magnetic not because of how he treats her, but because of how he treats his own vision. That's where real power lives, not in chasing women, but in chasing greatness. You cannot fake purpose. You cannot pretend to be driven. It shows in how you walk, how you speak, how you handle your days. When you wake up with intention, your energy changes. When your time means something to you, your presence means something to her. But when you drift, when you escape into distractions, when you delay your goals and numb your pain, she feels it. It's not just unattractive, it's unsafe. Because she knows, even if she can't explain it, that a man with no direction is a man with no leadership. And a man with no leadership cannot protect, provide, or build. Your life reflects your standards. If your habits are sloppy, if your goals are blurry, if your vision is weak, then your energy will echo that. And no amount of flirting or charm will mask it. She doesn't want to be your purpose. She wants to support your purpose. That's the difference. If you make her the center of your world, she'll feel pressure instead of peace. She'll feel weight instead of warmth. Because she's not meant to be your reason for existing. She's meant to witness a man who already knows who he is and where he's going. Get clear, get disciplined, get serious. The world is not waiting for you, it's moving. And if you keep sitting in confusion, the life you were built for will pass you by. The most attractive thing you can do is chase something bigger than her. Not because she doesn't matter, but because you matter first. That's what creates gravity. That's what makes her trust you. That's what makes her lean into your presence with admiration instead of obligation. Purpose creates power, and power, when it's quiet and focused, is irresistible. Build your mission, and you'll never have to beg for respect. You'll embody it. If you avoid conflict, you avoid growth. If you fear confrontation, you fear your own power. And if you constantly try to keep the peace at the expense of your truth, you are not being kind. You are being weak. Women don't trust men who fold under pressure, who smile when they're uncomfortable, who agree just to avoid friction. Because behind that behavior is a man disconnected from his strength, a man who would rather be liked than respected, a man who would rather stay small than risk tension. And that energy is not safe. It's suffocating. You think you're being thoughtful. You think compromise will win her admiration. You think avoiding disagreement will make her feel loved. But all it does is make you invisible. A man who agrees with everything, who never says no, who bends to every demand, slowly becomes irrelevant. Not because he lacks value, but because he refuses to protect it. You were not designed to be a doormat. You were not built to shrink. You were made to hold your ground with calm authority, not to dominate, not to control, but to lead with truth, even when it shakes the ground beneath you. Women don't want perfect harmony. They want honesty. They want alignment. They want to feel your boundaries, because boundaries show self-respect. If you can't say no, your yes means nothing. If you can't stand in your opinion, your voice holds no weight. And if you let disrespect slide because you don't want to cause a scene, you teach her to stop taking you seriously. She may not say it out loud, but deep inside, her respect starts to erode. Not because she's cruel, but because your silence says you don't value yourself enough to be real. You must stop fearing discomfort. You must stop confusing peacekeeping with strength. Real strength speaks the truth and lets the chips fall where they may. It doesn't chase approval. It doesn't flinch when challenged. It doesn't shrink when others disagree. It breathes, it stands tall, and it holds steady. That energy is rare. And when a woman feels it, she relaxes. She respects it. She trusts it. Because now, she's in the presence of a man who won't abandon himself to please others. A man who can disagree without aggression. A man who can speak truth without apology. This world has enough men who disappear the moment tension rises. It needs more men who stay rooted when things get hard. More men who say what they mean what they say, and walk away if their values are ignored. That's not rude, that's power. And power in its purest form is silent, still, and unshakable. Stop trying to be nice. Start choosing to be real. The version of you who never sets boundaries is not lovable. He's forgettable. And the version who fears conflict will never be respected. Strength is found in truth. And truth is what turns a man from tolerated into unforgettable. Your body speaks before your mouth ever does. Your posture, your eyes, your breath, your tone, they all reveal what's happening beneath the surface. You think she's listening to your words, but she's reading your presence. She sees the way your shoulders fold when you're unsure. She notices the hesitation in your voice when you doubt yourself. She feels the nervous energy when you're trying too hard to appear confident. You can't fake power. You either embody it or you don't. And when you don't, your body broadcasts that weakness without asking for permission. Weak posture tells the world you're apologizing for existing. Slouched shoulders, shifty eyes, soft voice, fidgeting hands. These are not small habits. They are signals. Silent confessions that say you don't believe you belong. You don't think you're enough. You're afraid of being seen, so you shrink. You're afraid of confrontation, so you lower your gaze. You're afraid of judgment, so you silence your tone. But in doing that, you disappear. You strip yourself of presence. And presence is the first layer of attraction, the first impression of power, the first test you pass or fail without saying a word. You don't need to be the loudest man in the room. You need to be the most grounded, the one who breathes deeply, moves deliberately, and stands like he means it. You don't need to force dominance. You need to radiate composure. That's the kind of man who gets noticed. Not because he demands attention, but because his stillness commands it. A woman can sense when you are in control of yourself. She can feel it in the way you walk, in the way you stand, in the way your energy fills the space without desperation. Confidence isn't volume, it's gravity. To build that gravity, you must start with the physical. Stand tall, not for image, but for identity. Keep your head up, not in arrogance, but in self-respect. Look people in the eye, not to intimidate, but to connect with strength. Breathe slower, move with intention, speak with conviction, even if your voice shakes at first. These things are not tricks, they are declarations. Declarations that you are here, you are enough, and you will not apologize for it. Stop leaking energy through your body. Stop collapsing into the background. You've done it long enough. You've waited for someone to give you permission to be powerful, but your body is your first chance to prove that permission was always yours to give. She will feel it. She will respond to it. Because strength that lives in your body becomes undeniable. Presence that flows through your posture becomes unforgettable. You don't need to say a word to be seen. You just need to carry yourself like a man who remembers who he is. The world will adjust. So will she. And when it does, it won't be because you try to impress her. It will be because you finally stopped hiding. She doesn't need a checklist to see your weakness. She feels it in your silence when you should speak, in your overreaction when things don't go your way, in the energy you carry, the tension in your body, the avoidance in your eyes. You think you're hiding it. You think she doesn't notice. But women are intuitive. They read emotion the way you read logic. They detect shifts in tone, changes in rhythm, subtle cracks in your confidence. What feels like a normal conversation to you is a full emotional scan to her. And the moment she senses you are uncertain about yourself, the foundation begins to shake. You don't have to say anything foolish. You don't have to fail dramatically. All it takes is one crack in your emotional frame, one slip into self-doubt, one sign that you're not grounded, and everything changes. She might still smile. She might still respond. But deep down, something pulls away. Respect fades. Trust erodes. Attraction turns to indifference. Because you didn't lead with force. You led with fear. You didn't stand in who you are. You tried to earn who you could be. And that energy can't hold her. Because it can't even hold you. Your weakness is not that you feel emotion. Your weakness is that emotion controls you, that your confidence rises and falls based on how someone treats you, that your inner world depends on the outer one staying calm. But life won't stay calm. People will test you, women will challenge you, situations will provoke you, and if every time something shakes you, you collapse, you never grow, you never lead. You never become the man she believes can protect her, guide her, or even hold space for her, not because she demands perfection, but because she needs to feel your stability when everything else feels uncertain. When you allow your mind to spiral, when you argue to win, when you break down over small things, she sees a man still ruled by the boy inside. And that's not who she's drawn to. She's drawn to the man who remains composed, who feels emotion but doesn't become it, who responds but doesn't react, who can hold space for chaos and still move with purpose. That's not just attractive, it's rare. And rare men are never overlooked. You don't have to fake being unbothered. You have to train yourself to become steady. You have to master the art of stillness, the strength of silence, the discipline of inner calm, not for her, but for you, so that when she watches you, she sees a man who doesn't need control to feel powerful, a man who owns himself fully. Because once you own yourself, you become untouchable. And that's when she stops looking elsewhere. That's when she locks in. Not to a version of you that performs, but to the man who finally arrived, unshaken, unafraid, and undeniable. Most men spend their lives blaming women for what they haven't yet built within themselves. They complain about being misunderstood, overlooked, or rejected, never realizing that what she pulled away from wasn't who he was, but who he refused to become. She didn't walk away from your looks. She walked away from your lack of self-possession. She didn't lose interest because you weren't good enough. She lost interest because your energy whispered that even you didn't believe you were. And the truth is, she doesn't just notice weakness, she feels it. And when she does, her instincts tell her to protect herself. Not from you, but from the absence of the man you could have been. Women are not the enemy, they're the mirror. They reflect back the strength you hold or the fear you suppress. Every subtle reaction she gives you, every moment of silence, distance, or disinterest, is feedback. She's not punishing you. She's responding to you. To your level of presence, your direction, your emotional clarity. When she pulls back, it's not always a rejection. Sometimes it's a test of your energy. To see if you will collapse, chase, beg, or blame. Or if you will stay still, stay centered, and stay rooted in your value. That's why blaming women never makes you stronger. It keeps you stuck. It turns you into a victim of a dynamic you don't yet understand. But if you shift your lens, if you realize that every reaction you receive is a reflection of your internal state, you stop blaming and start building. You start using feedback as fuel. You start refining your posture, your tone, your presence, your focus. You stop trying to be loved and start becoming a man who is naturally magnetic, because he doesn't seek validation. He radiates worth. The more you focus on what women are doing wrong, the more you miss what you haven't yet done right. Strength begins when you take full ownership of your energy, when you no longer make excuses for low standards, loose boundaries, or emotional chaos, when you stop asking why she didn't stay and start asking why you didn't rise. That shift, that brutal honesty, is the birthplace of masculine power. Not performance, not pretending, but presence. A quiet, unshakable presence that no one can ignore. She sees your potential before you do. She feels the power buried underneath your fear. But she cannot respect a man who hasn't yet claimed it. She cannot stay with someone who still waits to be chosen instead of choosing himself. Every man has a choice. Continue blaming the world for what you haven't yet become, or step fully into the process of building yourself into someone no woman could ever overlook. The mirror never lies. And the moment you stop flinching at what it shows, you begin to change. Not for her, but because you finally understand that every weakness she sees is not a curse. It's a call to rise, a call to lead, a call to return to who you were meant to be. Nothing weakens your presence more than living in emotional debt. When you carry wounds that were never faced, rejections that were never processed, failures that were never forgiven, you don't walk through life as a man. You walk through it as a prisoner. And no matter how confident you try to appear, no matter how much you say the right things or dress the right way, she will sense the weight. Women feel what's unresolved. They feel what you suppress. That buried pain shows up in how easily you get defensive, how fast you lose control, how quickly you seek reassurance. It shows up in your tone, your reactions, your patterns. And it tells her something very clearly: you haven't yet faced yourself. The strongest man is not the one who hides his pain. It's the one who masters it, not by pretending it doesn't exist, but by confronting it with courage. Because your unresolved emotions don't disappear, they leak into your relationships, into your communication, into your energy. When you don't own your past, it owns you. It shapes how you love, how you lead, and how you respond to pressure. And when she feels that instability, she doesn't feel safe. Not because she wants perfection, but because she craves truth. And truth doesn't come from pretending you're healed. It comes from doing the inner work no one sees. Healing isn't weakness. It's responsibility. It's the process of reclaiming the parts of yourself you abandoned to survive, the parts you suppressed because they didn't feel manly, the grief you buried, the anger you denied, the shame you never spoke of. These emotions are not your enemy, they're your signal. They're the doorway to strength. Because when you face them fully, they lose control over you. And when you gain control over yourself, your energy changes. You become still. You become calm. You become powerful. Not because you're unaffected, but because you've trained yourself to respond, not react. A healed man doesn't need validation. He doesn't crumble under pressure. He doesn't project his wounds onto the woman in front of him. He sees her clearly because he's no longer clouded by his past. He leads with clarity because he's no longer led by fear. And she feels that in the way he listens, in the way he holds space, in the way he moves without needing to prove. That level of presence can't be faked. It can't be copied. It can only be earned through the pain you were once afraid to feel. If you want to stop being seen as weak, stop avoiding what's uncomfortable. Stop running from the hard truths. Start cleaning the mess you've buried inside. Because the man who refuses to look inward will always project outward. He'll always blame, chase, or collapse. But the man who looks himself in the mirror and says, "I will not carry this weight anymore," begins a transformation no woman can ignore. Strength isn't built by hiding your scars. It's built by facing them and rising above them with purpose, clarity, and unshakable conviction. Strength is not how much you control. It's how deeply you trust. The man who constantly tries to monitor, manage, and manipulate every situation isn't strong. He's afraid. He's afraid of losing her, afraid of being outshined, afraid that if he loosens his grip, he'll be forgotten, replaced, or left behind. And that fear shows up in jealousy, in possessiveness, in passive-aggressive questions and silent punishments. It shows up in how he scans her phone, questions her tone, doubts her words. But what he doesn't realize is that the moment he starts trying to control her, he loses control of himself. No woman feels safe in the presence of a man who is ruled by insecurity. When you don't trust yourself, you cannot trust her. And when you don't trust her, no amount of reassurance will ever be enough. You'll keep reaching, keep asking, keep watching for signs. But all that does is prove to her that you're not standing in your power. You're standing in fear, hoping she'll save you from it. But no one can. That work is yours. And until you do it, you will keep destroying your own peace with questions that never had to be asked, because they were born from wounds that were never healed. Trust isn't naivety. It's clarity. It's knowing who you are, knowing your worth, knowing what you bring to the table, and being so grounded in your identity that you don't need constant evidence to feel secure. You don't need to monitor her moves because you've already mastered your own. You don't fear her attention because you've already earned your own respect. And that kind of man is rare. He doesn't beg for loyalty. He commands it by how he carries himself, not by what he demands. The need to control is always a symptom of internal chaos. And the cure isn't more rules, tighter grip, or louder commands. The cure is stillness, confidence, the kind of inner strength that allows you to say, if you stay because you want to, not because I forced you to. And that energy is magnetic. Because now you're not pushing her to be yours. You're giving her a reason to choose you over and over again. Let go of the need to grip. Let go of the fear that makes you act like less than who you are. The moment you trust yourself is the moment she starts to trust you more. She feels it when a man is secure. She relaxes when she knows you're not ruled by paranoia. And she draws closer when your love doesn't suffocate. It strengthens. That's what separates the weak from the unshakable. Not volume, not control, but trust. Quiet, powerful trust in yourself, in the connection, and in the path you're walking. That's the energy that doesn't just attract, it keeps her. Not because you caged her, but because she feels most free by your side. You cannot earn respect by asking for it. You earn it by becoming a man who respects himself so deeply, he no longer tolerates the environments, the habits, or the people that drain his power. Weakness isn't just in what you do, it's in what you allow. Every time you stay silent when you should speak, every time you tolerate disrespect just to keep the peace, every time you betray your values to avoid being alone, you're sending a loud message without saying a word. You're telling the world, and every woman in it, that you don't see your own worth. And if you don't see it, no one else will. She watches not just how you treat her, but how you treat yourself. She notices what you tolerate, what you settle for, what you keep around that no longer serves you. She pays attention to the way you speak about your life, your standards, your time. And if she senses you're too afraid to draw the line, too unsure to walk away, or too dependent to demand more from yourself, she can't fully respect you. Not because she wants to judge you, but because she wants to feel led by someone who leads himself first. A man without standards is a man without spine. He floats through life trying to please everyone and ends up inspiring no one, because he thinks being agreeable is strength. But strength isn't how much you can tolerate. It's how clearly you know what you won't. And once you stop begging for approval and start enforcing your standards, everything around you changes. People treat you differently. Women look at you differently. Life responds to you differently. Because now, you're no longer waiting to be chosen. You're choosing. Every moment. Every time. You were not made to chase love through compromise. You were made to embody such certainty, such integrity, such raw presence, that anything less than truth cannot exist in your space. And when you move from that energy, You don't lose people, you filter them. You don't repel connection, you attract alignment. Because the right ones won't be intimidated by your standards, they'll be drawn to them. Because your standards reflect your identity. They show that you're not here to be liked, you're here to live in truth. And that truth is what makes you undeniable. Stop shrinking. Stop editing yourself to fit places you've already outgrown. Stop being loyal to patterns that sabotage your strength. You know what's beneath the surface. You know what needs to be cut off, cleaned up, and walked away from. So do it. Not with anger, but with conviction. Because the man who protects his standards protects his future. And the woman who sees that strength in you doesn't second-guess your worth. She rises to meet it. Not because you demanded respect, but because you became the kind of man who commands it by how he lives, breathes, and moves. That's not ego. That's alignment. And alignment is the quiet force that separates the forgotten from the unforgettable. A man becomes weak the moment he needs to be understood before taking action. He waits for someone to validate his pain. He waits for someone to see his effort, to notice his struggle, to recognize the intention behind his choices. But while he waits, life moves on. Respect fades, opportunities pass, and she loses interest. Not because she's cold, but because she's watching a man hand away his power by depending on external permission to move forward. Strength doesn't wait to be seen. Strength sees itself. It stands tall in silence, even when no one is watching, even when no one applauds, even when the world misunderstands every step. If your actions are powered by the need for understanding, you will live in emotional chains. Because not everyone will see your heart. Not everyone will know your pain. Not everyone will recognize the pressure you carry. And if you need them to before you feel worthy, you've given them the keys to your identity. That's not power. That's imprisonment. And women can feel it. She knows when your effort is real, and she knows when it's secretly begging to be noticed. She feels when your kindness is pure, and when it's laced with silent resentment for not being acknowledged. That quiet desperation is louder than you think. And the moment she senses it, the strength behind your actions begins to vanish. Real masculinity doesn't need to be understood, it needs to be embodied. It's not about proving your point, it's about becoming the point. Through consistency, through calmness, through a level of focus that doesn't require applause to feel justified. The strongest men are not the ones explaining themselves constantly. They're the ones who speak with clarity, then walk their truth with unwavering discipline. No overthinking. No emotional bargaining, just alignment between belief and behavior. When you release the need to be understood, you step into a deeper kind of freedom. Now you're no longer seeking approval for your mission. You're fulfilling it. You're no longer adjusting your path to fit someone else's perspective. You're following your inner compass, and that presence, that direction, that certainty, it draws her in. Not because you forced it, but because she feels the quiet dominance of a man who no longer needs to be seen to move. He just moves. And that energy is unforgettable. You were not created to live in emotional dependency. You were built to carry your fire with or without applause. You were made to rise even if no one cheers. Because the man who keeps showing up without needing to be seen eventually becomes impossible to ignore. Not because he chased attention, but because he became the type of man who doesn't flinch without it. That is where true power lives, in the silence, in the solitude, in the steady decision to keep rising with dignity, direction, and complete detachment from the need to be understood. That is when you stop being overlooked. That is when you start becoming undeniable. If you always need to be liked, you'll never be respected. The need to be liked is a trap that softens your words, weakens your choices, and robs your presence of its authority. You begin to shape yourself around other people's preferences, walking on eggshells just to avoid rejection. You overthink every message, second-guess every move, filter every opinion through the lens of acceptance. But the more you do it, the more you disappear. And she feels that disappearance. She feels the absence of strength in every smile that hides your truth. Every time you nod when you mean no. Every time you apologize for simply existing with your own needs, your own values, your own mind. Respect doesn't grow in the shadow of approval. It grows in the light of truth. The man who stands firm in what he believes, even when it's unpopular, radiates something rare, integrity. The man who can be kind without being weak, honest without being cruel, direct without being arrogant. He becomes a pillar, a reference point, someone who doesn't shift just to be liked, but sharpens himself to be real. That kind of energy makes people listen. That kind of presence earns attention without asking for it. And that kind of man is never mistaken for someone forgettable. When you obsess over being liked, you put your self-worth in the hands of others. You make your mood dependent on their reactions. If they approve, you feel good. If they don't, you collapse. That's not confidence. That's dependence disguised as humility. And women sense it. They sense the subtle pleading behind your compliments. They feel the hesitation in your boundaries. They notice the way you seek comfort in being agreeable instead of strength in being authentic. And that softness doesn't build trust. It builds doubt. Because if you can't be solid in yourself, how can she feel safe leaning into you? You don't have to be rude to be respected. You have to be whole. You have to be clear. You have to be willing to risk being misunderstood to stay aligned with your principles. And when you do, something powerful shifts. You no longer chase connection, you attract it. You no longer bend to pressure. You become the pressure. And the people who resonate with your truth rise to meet you, not because you played a role, but because you stood tall in your real identity. You were not born to be liked by everyone. You were born to be respected by those who recognize substance when they see it. Stop weakening your edges to fit into soft spaces. Stop editing your strength to make others comfortable. Start standing in who you are, without explanation, without apology. Because the man who walks through life rooted in truth, calm, direct, unshaken, doesn't need to ask for respect. He becomes the kind of man whose energy demands it, quietly, consistently, unmistakably. That's not ego. That's self-possession. And it's one of the most attractive forces a man can ever carry. Weak men wait for motivation. Strong men move from discipline. The moment you rely on how you feel to decide what you'll do, you've already lost control of your life. Emotions are waves. They rise, crash, and vanish. But discipline is the anchor. It's what keeps you moving when your mind screams to stop. It's what separates the man who dreams from the man who builds. And women notice. They see the difference between the man who talks and the man who executes. The man who makes promises in moments of passion and the one who keeps showing up long after the passion fades. When you lack discipline, everything about you becomes reactive. Your energy is inconsistent, your standards are flexible, and your presence is unstable. She feels it in how quickly you get distracted, how easily you get pulled off course, how often you say one thing and do another. And no matter how charming you are, no matter how well you speak, it all falls apart when you lack follow-through. Discipline is not about being robotic. It's about being reliable. And when a woman feels that you can't even lead yourself, she instinctively knows you cannot lead anyone else. Every time you skip what matters, every time you choose comfort over growth, you send a message to your nervous system that quitting is acceptable, that avoidance is normal, that short-term pleasure is worth more than long-term strength. Over time, that message becomes your identity. You start to see yourself as someone who breaks commitments, delays action, and gives up when it gets hard. And that identity leaks into your relationships. It poisons your confidence, dilutes your purpose, and weakens your presence. Because a man who doesn't keep his word to himself can't expect others to believe in him either. But the beauty of discipline is that it doesn't require talent. It doesn't care how motivated you are. It only asks one thing, that you show up over and over, without excuses, without emotion, without negotiation. You do the work because it's who you are, not because you feel like it today. And when you move from that place, something inside you hardens, not in a cold way, but in a powerful, stable, immovable way. Your energy sharpens, your presence deepens, your focus intensifies. And she feels that, she trusts that, because now she's witnessing a man who is not driven by impulse, but led by vision. You become trustworthy, not just to her, but to yourself. And that trust is everything. Because when you trust yourself, you stop seeking permission. You stop chasing easy. You stop needing someone to push you. You move, not because life is convenient, but because your mission is clear. That's when you stop being soft. That's when you stop breaking down. That's when you stop being forgettable. Discipline turns average men into forces of nature. And when a man becomes that, no one wonders if he's strong. They already know. If you need to be the center of attention to feel worthy, you've already lost the frame. True confidence doesn't shout. It doesn't beg for eyes. It doesn't compete for space. It holds steady, silent, grounded, because it's not performing. It simply is. The moment you chase attention, you confirm to the world that you feel invisible without it. You give away your power in the hope that someone will notice. But real power doesn't chase, it attracts. It draws attention without asking for it because it radiates from within, not from a need to prove anything to anyone. The man who constantly tries to be seen is the one who hasn't yet seen himself. He looks outward to feel important. He jokes louder, talks more, interrupts often, not because he's confident, but because deep down he fears being forgotten. That kind of energy may grab short-term attention, but it never earns lasting respect because people can feel the difference between genuine presence and loud performance, and women especially can feel it. She knows when your energy is rooted in internal peace, and when it's driven by insecurity trying to hide behind charisma. Presence isn't about being the loudest in the room. It's about being the most solid. The man who doesn't need to announce himself, yet everyone feels him when he enters. That's not ego, that's depth. And it only comes when you no longer seek your value through external validation. When you no longer need to be seen to believe in yourself. When you don't measure your worth by how many eyes are on you, but by how steady your soul remains when no one is watching. You don't have to fight for the spotlight when you've built something inside you that shines without effort. When you're focused, grounded, consistent, and clear, your energy becomes undeniable. Not because you're louder, but because you're real. You're not trying to stand out. You're simply not willing to blend in. And that quiet refusal to shrink, that effortless embodiment of who you are, makes more impact than any performance ever could. So stop chasing attention, stop needing constant recognition to feel secure. Pour that energy into becoming so focused, so refined, so disciplined in your craft and character, that your very existence becomes magnetic. Let your actions speak. Let your energy carry. Let your presence do what words never could. Because when you no longer need to be the center, you become the axis, the thing everything naturally rotates around. That's what true masculinity feels like. It doesn't demand. It doesn't entertain. It doesn't plead. It simply holds. It leads. It grounds. And when a man reaches that place, the world leans in. Not because he asked it to, but because something in his stillness, something in his certainty, speaks louder than noise ever could. That's when strength stops being a performance and becomes your natural state. Unshaken, unbothered, unmistakable,